Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hi friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to speak with PJ Slauson, President and CEO of CLK Supplies located in Post Falls, Idaho. CLK is a distributor of key and lock products designed to serve the professional locksmith customer. From a young age, PJ was a locksmith at heart. Like many entrepreneurs, he found his niche by challenging the status quo and looking for better ways to serve his industry. By using technology and social media, PJ has built a thriving business in an otherwise stagnant industry. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Hey, PJ, welcome to Distribution Talk. Thank you for taking the time with me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. So give us a little background. How did you get into, where did CLK Supplies come from and what got you into this thing?
So, if I take you back from the very beginning, my dad is a locksmith. And at age 6, he had me cutting keys and rekeying locks, a typical family business, right?
Yep. Oh, yeah. You get dragged in. Right. Child labor. Yeah, I get it, man. I'm into it. Yeah,
absolutely. So I started doing that. And as time went on, I actually had my first business at 10 years old. I was selling red worms to convenience stores for fishing.
Nice.
So I had like a little route we would do, and every Saturday morning, get up early, pack the worms into the little containers, take them around, do that kind of stuff, and ended up selling it when I was about 12. Next thing you know, I get into high school and I'm working for my dad doing full-blown locksmithing. So in Idaho at the time when I was 15, you could drive.
Yes, so, I remember. I know. I envied those guys. Yeah.
Right?
Didn't you get your license at 14 or something like that? Or
yeah, it was like somewhere around 14. At 15,
yeah,
you could drive.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember yourself. That. Yeah.
And so, he has a 24-hour business, right? So he just put me on call. So I would transfer the phone in the mornings when I had to go to school. But, if someone locked their keys in their car at 2 a.m., well, I had to go do it, right? So as it happened, I graduated, I started going to college, had no idea really what I wanted to do with my life. I was exploring a few different options and I figured I might as well go to college in the meantime. Well, while this was going on, I was dating this girl at the time who's now my wife. And in her parents' basement, her dad was on his computer and he was at this site called eBay.
Yeah.
And he was doing a bunch of stuff. And I was kind of curious. I was like, hey, what do you have going on there? And he was like, oh, I'm actually just selling all this stuff. I've made like $1,000, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, man, that's kind of interesting. It just kind of like stuck with me a little bit.
Sure.
And the next day at work for my dad at his lock shop, in the back corner, he had these shelves that had some leftover kind of products on, mainly key rings.
Okay.
A lot of different key rings. And I was like, hey, Dad, could I try selling those on eBay and like split the money with you or something? Because those are just dead stock, really.
Right.
And he was like, yeah, if you think you can, go for it. So I was like, okay. So I put them on there and sure enough, they sell right away.
Right.
And I was like, hey, where did you get those from? How do I get them again? And he gave me this binder that had all these different addresses and phone numbers in of some suppliers that he had got them from. And I called them up and asked them if I could order. And some said yes, some said no. And I just started selling on eBay, really.
Right.
As it started going and the same people started to reorder. And it's like, you know what, maybe I should make a website.
Yeah.
And try selling them that way. So, at this time, I'm broke. Okay. Like I think I was making $8 an hour working for my dad.
Right.
I had no money, I had a car payment and it was just a bad deal.
Right.
And so I ended up just getting a little bit of inventory, like whatever I would sell, I'd rebuy and just kind of started that way. And for the website, I had a friend who happened to be a web developer that I paid him I'd buy him breakfast once a week.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
Without a shadow of a doubt, I wouldn't even be doing this today if he wasn't willing to do that for me.
Right.
But
No, it's interesting that you say that, that you find in these stories that, there is somebody who is willing to work for, non-monetary wages and they're willing to support you along the way. And I think when we look back, we start to see those people that do support you.
absolutely. Yeah. So I ended up getting our website put up, very limited products. I mean, you could
Mhm.
essentially put it all in a couple shoe boxes. And that was really the start.
Yeah.
So I had that going and I had the website up and I was
Yeah.
like, man, I need to figure out how to make some money. I'd like to get married. And at this point, like, I'm sure my future in-laws would be like, how is this guy even going to contribute?
Yeah, right, right,
Right.
right. Sure.
So while I had the website going, I was still selling on eBay a little bit,
Yeah.
and I was going to college, and it got to a point where my phone started to ring quite a bit. And
Yeah.
so I was like, you know what? I just transfer the landline to my cell phone, and I'd go sit in college class all day. And when the phone would ring, I would go out into the parking lot or into the hallway and answer the phone. Now, this wasn't happening like every 10 minutes, right? I mean, it was
Yeah.
happening maybe once or twice a day. And
Right.
I'd go out there and I'd go out in the hall or go outside and I'd literally write down the order and go back into class. And then that night I would process it.
Right.
And this was going on for a while, and we kept on getting more and more orders, and things were going pretty well. And I get this call one day, and it's from the producer of the TV show CSI Miami.
Interesting.
And they
Okay.
were like, so we're looking at your website and it looks like you kind of have a background in this kind of stuff. And we have these scenes coming up and we want them to look realistic. What do you have that can make these couple scenes look realistic? And so I kind of thought about it and wrote it down. I was like, you know what, can I call you back? I need to
Sure.
see, right? So I get off the phone and I essentially go right back to my dad's lock shop. I was like, hey, Dad, what tools do you have here that I can sell? And he's like, what
Right.
do you mean? I'm like, well, the TV show CSI Miami called and they need some props that look real and I don't have them. So can I buy and resell a couple of your old tools or something? And that's
Yeah.
what we ended up doing.
All
And
right. So they were looking for props primarily.
yeah, they were pretty much looking for props.
Okay.
And
Gotcha.
that was really the turning point for me is when all that was going on, I was like, am I going to keep studying? Am I going to just
Right.
go ahead and do this? Like, what do I really want? And I was like, you know what? This is fun. I'm having a good time. And I ended up dropping out of school
Mhm.
and just starting to do it full time at that point.
Yeah. One particular client I look back on, he chose to forego college as well. And he became one of the most successful distributors I've ever met, really extremely successful in several businesses. And, there's some point, that maybe college isn't the best path for an entrepreneur. You hear it all the
Sure.
time, that you find something you're really interested in. Maybe you got to pursue, maybe you have to jump right then. You can't wait that extra couple of years or whatever it may take to finish off that degree. It's strike while the iron is hot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was one of those moments for me where so I dropped out of going to school and I was just like doing, general studies at that
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But I did start going to what they call around here, at least, workforce training classes.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Right. So I started going to those and I started just reading all sorts of books about business and
Yeah.
marketing and,
Yeah.
all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think that, honestly, I mean, and this is no knock on school, but best years of my life, I'll be honest with you, but, no knock on school. But I think many people who have that ability to absorb, information and apply it, going out and reading and, watching, again, videos or whatever it may be to assimilate that information, you may not need that classroom education.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in business for me, I was probably, I'm 35 right now and I
Mhm.
started doing it when I was 19. And probably when I was like 22-ish, I read two books. I mean, at this point, I'm just absorbing as much information as I
Sure.
can because at that point, I realize I don't know anything about anything
Right.
in business. So I read two books over a Christmas, like a couple days before Christmas, we taken off. And I read them like right back to back over just a couple of days because the
Yeah.
information that they talked about was like, I'm like, okay, how do I do this? And
Mhm.
those books were Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover
Okay.
and Dr. Thomas Stanley's The Millionaire Next Door.
I am familiar with the second one. Yeah, The
Okay.
Millionaire Next Door. I was told to read that several years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I ended up reading those books. I loved what those guys had to say. Didn't really know either one of them. I'd never really heard of them. And
Yeah.
I really started to just apply those principles into my life as kind of like a operating system.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's what I've tried to do is just take the different knowledge and information. I'm like, okay, how do I apply this to my life as an operating system to help, keep my business and me personally keep growing and going down the road?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. I think, again, we find these sources of information, whether it be a book, a seminar, or an advisor, or some sort of mentor that really takes you to that next step in your development. Yeah. It's always fascinating to find those people along the way or those sources along the way, to get you going. So,
Yeah.
when was kind of the turning point in I've now got to get this out of the shoe boxes and I've got to put it, into a garage, or you're looking at a warehouse? Where did that all come from?
Yeah. So the process after I decided to do it full time is what I was really doing was working for my dad 40 hours a week. And
Yeah.
then I was still living with him at the time. And down in his laundry room at his house is where
Okay.
the computer was set up. And
Okay.
so every morning I'd wake up super early, go down there, print off all my orders, go to work, go to his work. And in the back upstairs, he had this maybe a 30 by 12 kind of area that I started to put this stuff in. And I'd
Okay.
go there and I'd pack them all up, get them all ready. And then at the end of the day, I would just swing by and drop them off at the post office.
Okay.
As that started to progress and the inventory started to become more and more, I realized that no one in my life had told me that, like, if you're going to run a distribution business, you need money,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
inventory, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because
And
people, yeah, it's tough to finance sometimes.
it is. And that's one of those things that no one really told me I needed money, right? So I just devised this plan where I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to work on the side and not take a penny out of the business and just use my retained earnings,
Yeah.
which at the time I would call just the money I had in my bank, to
Right.
keep buying more and just keep buying more and keep buying more.
Gotcha.
It really helped me focus on products that were profitable, right? So
Mhm.
low margin products, I decided is like, you know what? Like, if this item's $1,000 and the manufacturer wants me to sell it for 1,200, like, that's not enough money for me, because that
Right.
$1,000 at the time I didn't have much more than that, right? So
Right.
I
Right.
would have to be real strategic on the products I brought in
Mm-hmm.
and just started growing organically through retained earnings. And as a matter of fact, fast forward, 15 years later, I still do that, right?
Yeah.
So I just use retained earnings to continue to push the envelope. And I've kind of made it a rule that I will never, I won't ever take distribution wise as an owner more than 50% of my profit each year,
Gotcha.
to just keep dumping that back into inventory.
Sure. No, it's interesting, that, people develop their own rules of thumb. What works for you, and you keep going on that. And, there may be a time, that you might want to modify that eventually, but, right now it's working for you. So you just kind of keep running with it. So,
Yeah, it does. From the start, we've essentially grown about 20% a year, and I've been able to just fund that myself. I've gotten offers to do it differently, and they just didn't really make sense, at least at the time. None of them, they just didn't really make sense to me.
sure. No, and that's absolutely, and I think that that's actually something very interesting, as a business owner and really as an entrepreneur. These have to make sense, and they have to feel right in your gut.
Hmm.
If it doesn't, or if it's a little unsettling or confusing, you're going to be distracted, and I think
Yeah.
that's the big thing. And really, if you stick, sticking with your gut is actually a very important part of building these companies. So tell me now, you got a little influence from another Laka distributor out there. Tell us a little bit about that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I, first started, selling, and I started to get more and more inventory, I
Yeah.
have zero experience in warehousing and in any of that. And so
Right.
I hatched this great plan to call up one of my dad's suppliers at the time,
Yeah.
which was a company called Clark Security Products,
Yeah.
who Bruce Merrifield had owned, and then his brother at the time when I went there
Right.
had owned
Right.
it.
Yeah.
And I called up a guy I knew there from ordering parts when I worked for my dad and said, "Hey, is it possible if I were to come over there, could you show me how you do everything? Because I don't have a clue, right? And he's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
and he kind of laughed, he's like, hey, you know what? Come on over and I'll take you through and ask me as many questions as you want. So sure enough, we drove over to Seattle and he just takes me through and every aspect of it. I'm like, okay, so you sit here and you type up an order. Where does that paper go?
Right,
And
right.
for really just the ABCs of it, all the way through the warehouse to shipping, that whole process. And so I went there and he showed it all to me. And I immediately came back and set up my really tiny warehouse at the time to run under that same process.
Great. Now that's good. And again, there's that person or that influence that, that came in and said, yeah, come on over. I'll show you what I do, and without that, so many people get stuck. And I think that's really important for an entrepreneur to reach out, be able to reach out and ask for help. So many people that will help. I mean, that's the thing, they want you to succeed. They like these stories of people succeeding. And so, yeah, very important. No, I'm glad that person was able to do that for you.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, even down to how like they put the part numbers in their system.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I followed that same formula, everything. So it was pretty
Well,
funny.
and in that business, in the lock business, maybe I'm thinking more of the hardware business. There's so many variations that, trying to come up with a nomenclature on a website or, even in your database is tough.
Yeah.
So many little variations. Yeah. I've worked with a couple different hardware companies, door hardware, those types of folks. And the variations on product is just brutal. I mean, trying to standardize that is awful. Awful.
It really is. I mean, even to the naked eye, when you look at the part number or you grab the box,
Yeah.
it could be so many different things. And so like every little part matters. Right.
Yes,
And so,
it
yeah,
does.
it can be complicated.
Absolutely. So, well, good. So you were able to put that in. And by the way, at this time, what did you use to keep all your part numbers? Did you get a software system? What did you do?
Oh yeah. So at that time I just went down to like our local Office Max or something and bought QuickBooks. I think it was like QuickBooks Premier or something that
Yeah.
had an
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
inventory function in
Yes.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
There
just
you go.
started just typing them all in, getting it all set up.
Are you still on QuickBooks or are you
No. Yeah, we're on
long past?
yes, it was fun while it lasted, but
Yeah.
after a while you have to get to something that works much better.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, I think it's a great starting place for a lot of people, but eventually you have to get to a more sophisticated distribution software package or build your own, one of the two. So,
Yeah, well, and in today's world, it's so important to have a system that is connecting with, your website, with the shipping platform, that, you can have everything
yeah.
hooked and, automated essentially.
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of people that, maybe started out very similar to yourself and then, moved into, Shopify and then ShipStation, those products, that took them to that next level. And then, you get up to a certain level of sales and you're like, okay, well, now I got to get a little more sophisticated. I'm going to go to this platform. And so, yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely a technology journey for sure.
Yes.
All right, you've got some reasonable success going here. You're moving along. What was the biggest block? And you're like, this could derail me the whole way.
I've had several of them, I think just like every company has, but a few that really stand out to me were when I first started, I didn't have any money and having inventory and not having money is not really a great strategy for success.
No, that's difficult. Yeah,
Right.
that's a
Right.
challenge. Yeah.
The next one was getting manufacturers to give me an account.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's something that today it's kind of different than it was like in 2004, 2005 when I got started, because it was very like, old business model back then.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm young and I was kind of trying to get them just to take a chance on me. And it was a major problem back then.
Yeah. I've heard, again, a lot of clients I've worked with, and when they started their business, they had to choose suppliers that were willing to go with them, to run with them. And it may not have been their first choice of product line, but they needed somebody who was willing to bet on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had some of those as well. And I've made sure to this day, even though let's call them maybe like the most known manufacturer in the industry, they have essentially begged for our business and like, hey, we'll do whatever you want us to do to get it. I'm
Yeah.
just loyal to the companies that allowed me to exist, really.
Yeah. And I think that's highly important. And, for the manufacturers who listen to this show, it's like, I'm telling you right now, look for the PJs out there, because let's face it, the ones that shunned you, they don't get to play, down the road.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, our grudge streak runs really long sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there's still some manufacturers to this day that when they had set me up, I was looking at the pricing discount models, that they gave me, and I was just
Yeah.
trying to compare it to the rest of the industry. I'm like, okay, like, what does this look like? How much margin do I have to work with? Where are the opportunities in the product line? All those
Yeah.
things. And I realized that they gave me essentially retail pricing,
Yeah.
kind of what
List
everyone,
price. Yeah.
yeah, right. And I was like, guys, how am I supposed to resell this?
Yeah.
And they're like, well,
Yeah.
we don't consider you a real distributor. I'm like, okay, then why did you give me an account?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. It's like putting it in front of you, but not having any faith whatsoever. They're
Hmm.
just going to placate you. Yeah, I think, and that's a tremendous mistake. I know that, and this is going to sound terrible, but these folks have never taken a risk in their life. They get their check every 2 weeks. They get their 401k, they get their medical paid for. They've never taken a risk in their life, and so they don't understand how to work with someone like you, and they don't have that same fire, and that's really disappointing. And I think there's a huge disconnect sometimes between entrepreneurs that want to start out and these folks who have taken a corporate paycheck for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think there's this weird mentality that I've come across that they want to protect their existing customers.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
totally get that, right? The angle I don't think they spend enough time looking at is the market actually bigger than what they think it is.
right, right. I would agree with that for sure, for
Right.
sure.
And I think there's too much time being like, hey, you're in a similar territory to these companies. And so we don't want to, take any business away from them. I'm like, well, if the pie is that small to where you just want to if you think I'm just going to take business from them, then that doesn't make any sense. But what about the rest of the world?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, just thinking that through is, you were not selling in, Idaho, in Post Falls, Idaho. That was not your market. No, your market was eBay, worldwide. I mean, it was not. And so again, I think these guys sometimes get into a territorial mentality, that
Yes.
they're going to protect the folks, in that Spokane to Coeur d'Alene, that northern Idaho, region. And
Yes.
that's not what you were doing.
No, yeah, yeah, not even close. I mean, even to this
Right.
day, the couple 100 mile radius around me is like the smallest
Totally.
area that we do business in.
Dead spot. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. And again, I think there's a huge disconnect, with old line territory management, and some of these suppliers out there. And I wish I could say that that is gone, but it's not. It's really not. There's still a lot of that, protectionist type of. And I think I've always kind of viewed that as the tail wagging the dog. The manufacturer thinks they've got a better grip on the world, because they might be the brand. But that's what distributors are. We're service people, man. We hustle and we move around and we will shuffle the deck. And next thing you know, you're going to be on the outside looking in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there's, I've had my fair share of that over the years as
Yeah.
we've gotten going.
Well, and especially being in a small market, you're often overlooked. Some people call them flyover states. You don't necessarily get the same respect level, even though you're killing it, that you are doing things at a much greater rate. Think about, there's so many distributors that would die to be growing by 20% each round and be profitable and do this. And yeah, sometimes the
Yeah.
manufacturers don't have that respect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Part of your success, and one of the things I just wanted to touch on here has been your social media presence. I mean, I think that's something that, I noticed in doing my research a little bit, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, as you said. Tell me a little bit about what that meant to you and how you kind of came into that journey.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So distribution, like to me as a whole, I mean, it's very transactional, right?
Yeah.
It's a transactional business, but that's not necessarily very fun, at least to me per se. And so like for me, I was like, how can we like have some fun with this? How can we interact with our customers outside of it always just being around a dollar amount? And at the same time, is what I really learned over the years for me and my business is that like a lot of people, when they get into the distribution business, is from what I've seen, they almost like become like a Me Too company. So,
Yeah.
hey, we sell this product too, and we'll sell it for a little less or whatever it is, right? And they just keep
Right.
hammering
It's a
that.
race to the bottom.
Yeah, it's just a race
Yeah.
to the bottom. And for me, I was like, how can I leverage the strengths that we have that make us unique and
Yeah.
present those to the world and present those to our customers and try to have some fun? And so essentially is what that came down to for us was it's like, let's just try to interact with our customers and potential customers on social media and
Yeah.
let's just have fun, right? I mean, and if you look, I mean, you'll see my staff, I mean, they like to make fun of me quite a bit. If you saw any of the posts, right? They're always
Yeah. Yeah.
poking fun at me and, do that kind of
Sure.
stuff. And
Sure.
not only does it make it fun culture wise on the inside of the company, but I mean, who doesn't like on the customer perspective, seeing a company you do business with and the owner of the business being made fun of in a playful
Sure.
manner?
And willing to be vulnerable like that, and allow that to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell them, I was like, guys, the only reason I'm allowing you to do this is because I'm already married, right?
Yeah,
Because,
there you
you know,
go. Fair enough. Fair enough. So, again, looking at those different platforms, I mean, where did you start? Which platform? And then why did you seek that one in particular?
that was pretty much YouTube. And
Okay.
that's mainly what we focus on still to this day. And that was because growing up as a locksmith and having all the different skills,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I was able to demonstrate, talk about, and really have a face with our customers.
Yeah.
And that was really the main driver behind it.
Yeah, I mean, one of my things I love about YouTube, and I am a YouTube addict, but I love the kinds of content that you produce. I happen to like car guys, and so I look at guys who show how to fix something, that I'm fascinated by. I'm fascinated by that mechanical fix, and really the content you put out is really helping people learn how to do things. It's this education, just kind of free. It's just like
Yeah.
I'm giving of myself. And yes, I'm promoting, part of my business. Yeah, there's some not totally altruistic, but it's a big educational opportunity for those of us who like to dabble.
Yeah, absolutely. And for us, like the most rewarding part has been the amount of phone calls and emails that people send us
Yeah.
has really blown us away. And I had someone, bring it up to me and they're like, listen, they're like, when we go to a trade show, from like the manufacturer point of view, and
Yeah.
maybe there'll be 2,000 people there, right?
Right.
The
Right.
cost factor getting there and showing up and talking to the people face to face,
Yeah.
it's a lot. It's a lot in our
Yeah.
industry.
Yeah.
And to be able to have a video that has, 60,000 views on talking about a key machine, like
Yes.
the cost to do that another way is just astronomical.
Yeah.
And when they told me that, I was like, you know what? That makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that really has encouraged me to do it. But it's really been the feedback from the people who watch the videos and how they say it's affected them and them learning how to do something or getting them out of a tough pinch on a job or something. And it's been really rewarding that way.
Oh, that's fantastic. That type of marketing does make it fun. It takes a transactional business, as you said, buy this, hold it for a little bit, hope somebody buys it from you business to, having some fun with it.
Absolutely.
Now, you spend an awful lot of time on this, though. I mean, you shared with me that that's a big part of your responsibility in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd say on the average, I work 45, maybe 50 hours a week on average. And about 20 of those a week is just on video content. So it's definitely a large time commitment. And, all the offsite stuff we do, I have our graphic designer on staff, he comes with me and does all that. So yeah, I mean, it's, we're definitely all in when it comes to content right now.
Well, that's good. I mean, it sounds like it's really been quite a driver, quite a catalyst for your business. I mean, and if you think about it, where else do you get that kind of advertising muscle? I mean, I just don't see it.
No, I mean, you don't.
You don't.
It's something that over the past few years, especially with all the COVID stuff, you've seen like a lot of businesses try to like pivot to it.
Yeah.
And it's been kind of awkward for the most part, right? As far as, watching those, I've been seeing them happen. And yeah, it's been interesting because it really takes a ton of effort to start just to get it right.
Yeah.
And to find your voice on how you're going about it.
Totally. I mean, I can relate, just with this show. My early interviews were nothing like they are today, that it does. It's an evolution. You've got to put in the hours, you got to put in the effort, you have to understand the medium, or else it's going to come off, childish and amateurish.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
So I was fishing around here and I found that you had written a book and published it on Amazon. I think it's always kind of fascinating when somebody decides, I'm going to put together a book, which is not an easy endeavor.
So I did it for two reasons, really. One, so I could remind my wife that I'm an author now.
Okay, there you go. That's a good, published author. There you go.
And the other reason was at the time, I think I wrote it in 2014.
Yeah.
At the time, something we sell a lot of is pinning kits, okay. To rekey locks.
Yep.
And it's kind of one of the first things I believe that when people are looking at getting into, like we describe our customer base as anyone who works with locks and keys for a living, right? So it's kind of one of the first steps in there. Well, we're getting tons and tons of phone calls about, hey, so how do I exactly do this and this and that? And it was really taking up a lot of time for the customer and ourselves, trying to make it happen. And so I was like, you know what? What if I write a book on how to do it and just give it away when people buy pinning kits from us?
Perfect.
And I started doing that. And then people started to ask if they could just buy the book by itself and, so on and so forth. That's kind of how that came to be.
Gotcha. All right. Well, yeah. As someone who wrote one a long time ago and I'd never published it, and man, it's a brutal process. So let me ask you, would you do it again? Do you have book 2 coming? And remind me what the title is first. What is the title?
Yeah. Lock rekeying made simple.
Okay. Gotcha. And is there a 2.0 coming out?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely have a bunch of ideas for some different books to come out with.
Okay. Good.
I haven't got the desire at the moment to pound it out. I mean, as you start going, you do get some criticisms for when you do it as well. And I'm not quite there yet, but yeah, I definitely have a few more coming.
Gotcha. Well, one of the things I wanted to touch on, you had shared with me earlier that you had gotten involved with a coaching program. And if you wouldn't mind sharing that, I mean, it sounds like it was one of those really, again, pivotal things that has contributed to your success.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as business went on by myself, and you start hiring team members, you start doing all this other stuff, and business starts taking off, like I said, 20% growth on average. Only 1 year, which was 2009, we didn't grow at all.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
So many people would have been thrilled to be flat. I'll put it that way. That year. Yeah, that was a year that everybody wishes they had just broke even. But
yeah, it was tough, right? So as it was going on and stuff starts going, I find myself in 2014 at this point where business is getting bigger, the numbers are getting large, and I'm like, I'm a disaster, like my phone, everyone's calling and wanting talking to me. I have a line outside my door that, it's real noisy out there. So we have to keep it shut most of the time. And people are knocking on my door constantly and I'm getting nothing done. Okay.
Right,
nothing. Right. It's just a big disaster. And so I listened to a lot of books through Audible, and I listened to this book called The E-Myth Revisited.
Okay.
And I listened to it. And by the time I got to the end of the book, I was like, man, I want what this guy is talking about. Right. And I listened to it probably 10 more times, like almost in a row. And I got to the end. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to contact these people. Maybe they could put me in the right direction because what they're selling, I want to buy.
Okay.
And so I'd contacted them and we started on this coaching journey. It was funny. A couple days before I started coaching, I'm in Chicago in an Uber, getting ready for a trade show. And someone back at the office calls and they say, hey, PJ, we're out of paper. And so we can't print orders. And I'm like, okay, like, I mean, have we checked all the printers, right? Like,
Right,
we checked
right.
all the printers? And they're like, oh, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'll have to check. I'm like, well, can you like go somewhere and buy some paper? If not, I'm like, unfortunately, I'm in an Uber in Chicago and I can't
I
really
can't
help
do
you.
this. Yeah,
I
I
can't do
cannot do
this.
this. Right.
And even with management at the time, it was just a big fester, really. And with not having business experience, prior growing up in a family business and then doing this, I was like, you know what? That moment was when I'm like, I'm doing coaching. Like, I'm going to sign up, I'm going to do it. And we're actually just ending a 3-year journey that we were on doing
Nice.
this and just getting business in order. And at one point, our shipping error rates were, I mean, I hate to admit, our shipping error rates were about 3%. And that I got to a point where I'm like, if I can't fix that, I need to fire myself and find someone else to do this.
Gotcha.
So yeah, so I went through that journey and so many great things have come out of it. Not only more growth as a business, but to really get the business set up to live. I mean, pretty much what eMyth sells, in my opinion, what they teach is to set your business up for you to interact with it the way that you want to and have your customers feel and interact with it the way that you want them to, just by setting it up properly.
Okay. Okay.
It's amazing how that happens, because it really does.
That's great. Yeah, I've had friends that have looked at that book, and I don't think they went through the coaching, but that sounds like something that they really could have used, and probably they'd still be in business today if they did. But
yeah, I mean, it's intense, right? So on top of all the videos and stuff, it's like every 2 weeks, right? So you have like essentially a 15-20 page little booklet you read. There's a
yeah,
worksheet to fill out, and then you have to implement it in your business before your next coaching call every 2 weeks.
that's a little bit of stress.
Yeah,
There's a
I mean,
little
you're
pressure.
moving, right? You're
Yes.
moving.
Yeah. 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 It's not the feel good, touchy, therapy type of coaching. This is implementation 101.
It is, yeah. I mean, you really get good at taking an idea, a thought, crafting it to fit your business, and then putting it into place.
So 3 years later, you've done this journey at this point. You're just wrapping up. Look back 3 years and tell me, what are the things that you really feel like you've taken away from that experience?
Oh yeah, I would say there's one thing above all, and the best part is anybody can implement this in their business quickly and easily.
Hmm.
Which is, it's called they call it a EDM, which is an employee development meeting.
Okay.
Okay. And we still do it to this day. So like I meet with my managers and then they
Hmm.
meet with the people who work for them. And is what it is. It's typically about a half hour,
Hmm.
and you sit down with them in a private setting, and that 30 minutes is all about them, right? It's for them to talk about what is frustrating them, what they're excited about, what they need
Hmm.
help with, questions they actually have about the company or why this or that's been changed. And it really just gives them a voice.
Hmm.
And we've been doing it for about 2.5 years now. It's revolutionized our culture, our communication, everything.
Fantastic. I mean, no, that sounds great. I mean, it sounds like you got your money's worth out of that. Well,
Yeah.
good, good. Well, any last minute, I mean, besides, that big E-Myth one, I mean, I think that, that's a huge piece of advice, but any last pieces of advice for entrepreneurs? You kind of, followed the entrepreneur path, you left school, you said, I got a side hustle that is looking pretty good. So, anything else you would tell somebody who's thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have 2 other businesses right outside of
Okay.
distribution business. And I would say the big thing is when you decide to get into a business, like a distribution business, is really try to focus on what makes your business unique
Yeah.
and stay away from the Me Too stuff as much as possible. I mean, I get it, right? I mean, you can look at the biggest players in your industry and be like, okay, how can we compete with them? Well, the best advice I can give you is that you can't compete with them on their strengths. You have
Right.
to compete on your strengths. And until you identify and figure out what those are, I mean, you're going to take a beating.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not going to be much fun.
And it's not going to be fun at all.
Right. Right. And I think when the fun factor goes, it's over.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, PJ, thank you so much for taking the time with me, man. I really appreciate learning about your business and about your journey. And this has been great.
Absolutely. Yes. I've had a great time. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.